Dollemocracy. Facing down pessimistic politics with realistic optimism.
So it's not every story that we get positive news specifically related to the police. And we got some positive news in the way of consequences for 6 police officers that we talked about last year. This is the Mississippi cops that called themselves the Goon Squad. And you may remember this story from last year because we talked about it. It was the case of these 6 deputies in Rankin County, Mississippi, who broke into the home of 2 black men, Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. They tased them. They threatened to rape them. They put a gun in the mouth of one of the victims in Michael Jenkins's mouth, and they say that they didn't realize a bullet was in the chamber and pulled the trigger, and he was injured because there was a bullet in the chamber.
Absolutely terrible.
And according to this reporting, the Goon Squad was operating for like nearly 2 decades. They would, again, target people, barge into their homes, pull them over, handcuff them, torture them. I mean, it was really sadistic, gross stuff. And finally, we have some consequences in the form of them actually being charged, prosecuted, and sentenced for these crimes. And they got different sentences depending on what their level of involvement was in this particular case. And the sentences ranged from like 10, 27 to 40 years in prison.
Even after the former officers received extensive sentences, their legal troubles aren't over. A $400 million civil rights lawsuit filed by attorney Trent Walker on behalf of Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker now hangs over the heads of the Rankin County Sheriff's Department and the 6 former officers for their roles in the brutal attacks and torture of Jenkins and Parker.
No trial and sentences that are this serious and no occurrences that are this serious, we could allow the sheriff to remain in power. Exactly. Okay, and so who must be removed? Brian Bailey.
Activist and attorney Malik Shabazz on the steps of the federal courthouse Thursday, calling out Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey and his department. They say justice starts and ends with the department because the former deputies were under Bailey's supervision. They're calling for him to be held accountable.
There are many layers of corruption in Rankin County.
That's right.
And I'm praying that the United States Department of Justice will continue to investigate.
In court this week, the defense attorney for Daniel Updike agreed the officers adapted to the culture of the department, suggesting the willingness to use excessive force used by the deputies, nicknamed the Goon Squad, was accepted and taught.
How often does the leader of an organization not know what one of his first lieutenants is doing?
Attorney Trent Walker tells us the Sheriff's Department has filed a motion to dismiss the civil lawsuit. They're now waiting for a judge to rule on this motion. After the ruling, Walker says they will be ready to proceed as needed. The former officers are expected to be sentenced on a state level next month. We did reach out to Brian Bailey for comment, and he hasn't responded back just yet. For now, I'm live at Rankin County, Kennedy Cooper 16, WABT News.
So here's the age-old problem that we face relative to these types of abuses. This gross, insane story is that it's always incumbent upon the federal government, the Department of Justice, to bring civil rights charges against these monsters, and never the local police. In fact, in this case, as they just reported, the Sheriff's Department, rather than protecting and serving and trying to implement justice, they're trying to get the civil rights lawsuit dismissed. They're not in it for the administration of justice. They're here to protect the abusers and protect the department that held these abusers and employed these abusers and trained these abusers and allowed these abusers to abuse. Especially in Mississippi, in the Deep South, this kind of culture it must be rooted out, because it just disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, and you're touching on something important, which is what you heard in the clip, that Sheriff Brian Bailey of Rankin County, he's at the top of this. And when you look at reporting that says the Goon Squad was operating for around 2 decades, that means that they were going around.
And not these particular cops. It's generations of different cops.
Right. There's been a legacy of this type of violence in this police department. And you're talking about people that would band together, call themselves the Goon Squad, agree to participate in this kind of behavior where they would target people, torture them, waterboard them, put guns in their mouth, abuse them with rape them with sex toys. This is the kind of thing that was happening, and the sheriff is at the top. Nothing's been done about him yet, but there is starting to be more of a microscope on him, because as the reporting has continued, many people have said that they experienced the violence at the hands of a member of the Goon Squad, and they filed a formal complaint on those instances, and only a few said that they were actually contacted by the sheriff. And so there's now increased scrutiny on the sheriff. And we saw this when one of the reporters who broke this story, Brian Howie of Mississippi Today, sat down with John Yang over on PBS.
Well, we don't know how many cases there are out there, but we interviewed over 50 people who claimed they experienced or witnessed torture at the hands of Rankin County deputies. Of those, we were able to corroborate 17 torture incidents involving 20 victims dating back 18 years.
The sheriff is resisting calls to resign. How high up did knowledge about this go? How senior supervisors were aware of this?
You're right, John. The sheriff has resisted calls to resign and has claimed numerous times that he had no knowledge of his deputies' actions. But what we found were that some of the highest ranking deputies at the sheriff's department were involved and actively partaking in these torture incidents. And we spoke to multiple people who claimed they were tortured by deputies, who said that they filed complaints with the department, which should have gone to the sheriff, and in some cases even reached out directly to him to notify him of his deputies' actions.
What does this say about the culture of the department?
Well, it says that there's potentially a deeply ingrained culture of violent misconduct at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. This culture has actually been referenced several times in the sentencing hearings this week by some of the deputies themselves, who themselves acknowledged that they were indoctrinated into this culture and became a part of it as they went on at the Sheriff's Department.
The Rankin County is majority white. It sits right next to Jackson, which has one of the highest percentages of black population of any good-sized city in America. To what extent is there a racial dimension to this?
We found that the majority of the alleged victims who were tortured by Goon Squad members were actually white, and we think that that's because we are looking at a majority white county. However, when people of color came forward and said that they were tortured, there was often a racial aspect to the torture. They were called racial slurs. They were told to go back to Jackson, which is a common phrase, referring to Jackson and how many people at the department and in Rankin County see the city as a source of crime and corruption.
Do you think this is going on in other counties in Mississippi?
It's hard to say. We do know that across Mississippi, sheriff's departments have very little to no oversight. Our team, Alyssa Daly and Jerry Mitchell, have uncovered other accusations of sexual assault by sheriffs at different departments. And so it's clear here that we have an issue of accountability with sheriffs generally in Mississippi.
Not just in Mississippi. I mean, John Oliver did a piece about sheriffs back in 2020 that everyone needs to watch. If we remember, we'll link it below. If not, just search on YouTube sheriffs and John Oliver. Look, I know he's a reporter. He needs to be working on facts and evidence to make a statement. But I did chuckle. I don't know if I did it out loud when they said, "Is this happening elsewhere?" And he says, "Well, it's hard to say." No, it's not. No, it's not. This absolutely is happening because it continues to happen, not just in Mississippi, but all across the country with cops who feel emboldened in their authority, in their ability to abuse citizens under the color of law. That's why the hefty prison sentences have come down, and 40 years, decades in prison for their abusing citizens while under color of their job as an armed agent of the state.
Yeah, and that's why I really liked a statement from the lead attorney that's representing the victims, Michael Jenkins and Parker, where Malik Shabazz is the name of the attorney, and they said, quote, "The 40-year prison sentence given to Goon Squad member Christian Dedman by Judge Thomas Lee for the sick and serious crimes committed against our clients, Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, made history today. All of these Goon Squad sentences are sending a serious message to all rogue police and other Goon Squads all over America that justice is coming for you." And again, it's a shame that this is such a rare thing where a police officer is caught doing something they shouldn't be doing something illegal, and that they actually receive consequences for that. But that's why this is so important to talk about. And I hope other cops who are out there on their own Goon Squad see that and maybe question, oh God, am I going to get busted for this? Should I maybe stop terrorizing people? Should I stop torturing people in my position? I mean, I don't know that they're, capable of having that level of self-interrogation, but I can hope, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, these charges are serious. It's civil rights conspiracy, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and obstruction of justice. This is what you would expect from a criminal, not a police officer. It's the same thing, and this is a far lesser degree, but it's the cop who never uses his turn signal and then pulls people over for not using their turn signal. A guy who speeds and then who drives drunk. It's just, they feel emboldened because they are never checked. We do have a culture. The other thing in the package that grated on me is that people are listening to these other cops say, oh, I was indoctrinated into this culture. No, you weren't. You are participating in what is absolutely lawless behavior and abusing American citizens and violating your oath to the Constitution of the United States. It's just disgusting.
Well, it's also
sickening.
It's convenient that when they want to save their own ass and try to get a reduced sentence by blaming it on the culture within the police department, they're never willing to admit, the police, that there's a problem with the culture of police departments where they can't tell on their fellow officers when they are violating people's rights. They never want to admit those things, that it is systemic, right? That the problem within policing is systemic. They never want to admit that until, they're in court, and then they want to explain their behavior so that they can possibly get a reduced sentence.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look, we'd love to know what you think about this. We're going to keep following this case to see if there are local or state charges. 657-464-7609. And of course, you can email a voice memo from your smartphone or a regular old-fashioned email to idoubt@dollemore.com.
Just a little addition to that, when they get sentenced on their state charges, because there are the state charges. They're just awaiting the sentencing.
Yeah.